Joining me now is Dmitri Mehlhorn of Investing in Us, or U.S. I guess that's the point of it. It is U.S., capital U.S. Dmitri, welcome to the show.
Justin, a lot of people never realize that U.S. is also us. Did you ever hear that?
There we go. Well, yeah. now we know. Look, I'm very, very excited to talk to you because on our show, we very much are about the X's and O's and breaking down the how and why of a campaign, as well as the ideas. And you are somebody that is taking a very active role in terms of funding the issues that are animating this election. Can you just discuss what Investing in Us is and how you got into it?
Yeah. So one of the things about your show that is very much consistent with the work that we do is that we care only about winning elections.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in our particular case, we were formed because we wanted to make very sure, we wanted as much as possible to reduce the likelihood of President Trump winning a second term. And we started that work really in December of 2016.
So wasted no time.
Yes. Our background, so the group of us involved is mostly venture capitalists, tech investors, tech entrepreneurs, a few people in finance, and we basically looked at what happened in 2016, and for all of the challenges and problems that Clinton and her campaign faced, they were not a terrible ticket, and they had way more money, and yet they still lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so our approach as outsiders was to say, what can we do with our expertise in venture capital and finance to try to accelerate the pace of innovation on the anti-fascist side of the ledger to reduce the odds of a Trump reelect? And campaign efficacy.
Gotcha. And so when you're sitting there in Christmas time, 2016, obviously that is a very, very highly emotionally charged moment. What's the battle plan sketched out from your perspective? What were the weaknesses of the Trump machine that you could attack?
So. This may be a less interesting answer to you than the substance, but the initial answer was just actually a process point, which is how do you know what works? How do you know what's true? Because the problem with politics, I don't know, have you ever read The Politics Industry by Catherine Gale and Michael Porter?
I have not, no.
The problem with politics, as you've noted, is that it is an industry where there's really one event that matters every couple of years. And it is very hard to know which things you won because of and which things you won despite.
Yeah.
And every election has a huge number of people involved. Every presidential election has, obviously millions by definition. And all sorts of people are doing all sorts of things. And afterwards, there's a scrum to figure out what you won because and what you won despite. And in that scrum, it's very difficult to have good information. And over time, you will have the people who will rise to really control the campaign ecosystem will be those who are best at the knife fighting and claiming credit, not those who are necessarily best at winning elections, because the people who are best at winning elections eventually go on and do other things because they're good at other things too. And so our belief is that this structural problem with politics meant that by losing the White House, the typical pattern was that it would take about 8 years for the party to get its act together and have enough innovation to figure out how to barnstorm in with the right set of tactics to win. That is obviously what happened with Donald Trump coming in as an outsider in 2016. It is also what happened with Barack Obama coming in as an outsider in 2008. And George W. Bush from Texas and Karl Rove and so on. Yeah. Goes all the way back. And it is a repeating pattern in the post-Civil War era that the parties flip the White House roughly every 8 years. Not always, but roughly. And so as a rough rule of thumb, we realized that if things didn't change, it would take the Democrats 8 years to figure out how to get Trump out of office. and we did not believe that the American experiment would survive that. So we wanted to accelerate the ability of the other party to oust him in that amount of time. Now, so that's the process. Now, the question is, in light of that, how do you do that? What kind of evidence counts? And one of the things we realized, or that we believed, is that the only evidence that counts is winning an actual election.
Yes.
The only thing that matters. And the election that we cared about was going to be taking place in the fall of 2020. And so every election between when we started thinking in Christmas of 2016 and the big presidential election in 2020 was an opportunity to experiment, learn, do. And so we funded literally hundreds of different groups to try different things over time and measured them as best we could, sometimes quantitatively, sometimes more subjectively. And the ones that did the best, and one, we would try to scale. So we started with the House of Delegates races in Virginia in 2017, and then we moved on to the congressional battlegrounds in 2018. We did a lot with the specials along the way. We got involved toward the end in the presidential primary, and by the end, we were putting our recommendations, our capital, and others were following us at this point as well, to more innovative organizations, which are the ones that I believe will make the difference in getting Democrats over the top against Trump this time.
So when you're experimenting, I would imagine that broadly this kind of goes into offense and defense, either you fighting against Republican candidates in some of those battlegrounds that you were describing before, or bolstering the Democratic candidates in those battlegrounds, or at least candidates that you think would roughly be analogous to Trump versus a Democratic candidate in 2020. What did you find in that experimentation process was the most effective?
So, look, let me start with the ones that did not work, just because that gives you a little bit of
I love it. Yeah, let's go.
So, for example, we've spent a lot of energy early trying to support, incubate, inculcate resistance to Trumpism in the center and on the right, and within the Republican Party. So, for example, we put substantial investment into CrowdPack, which was a decentralized platform that helped raise money for people who have ended up being superstars, like current Democratic congressman and senatorial candidate Andy Kim used CrowdPack as part of how he broke in. Same for Lauren Underwood, quite a few others. But it was also available to Republicans, et cetera. And the CEO was a guy named Steve Hilton, and he went on to become a Fox News contributor. It's just the Republican opposition, the principled Republican opposition, has mostly crumbled. And most of the efforts we made to invest in that failed. We also made some very, very big data investments that failed. For example, we were backers of Alloy Commons, which was supposed to be a big data ecosystem to improve upon the combination of Van and Catalyst and everything else that was out there. That ended up basically imploding, and the assets ended up being transferred over to Jeremy Smith at Civitech, who's using them very effectively to improve voter data file management and improve voter registration and things like that. So that's an example of a mix of things that did and didn't work. But by the way, like our efforts in the anti-Trump Republican world mostly failed. But only mostly. Like we were able to provide some of the transition capital that helped Sarah Longwell and the Bulwark and that whole crowd get off and running.
Gotcha.
And they're very effective. So
that was so looking back on it, the idea of bolstering Republican stopping power to Trump was not something that the juice was worth the squeeze on.
In retrospect, it wasn't. Now.
Yeah.
Does that mean it was never available, or does that mean just that our strategies failed? Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
But it did not work, obviously.
Now, what did work?
So, one of the things that that we look at, there are various ways that we can look at it. But for example, one thing that we believe worked was the spending money in the courts. And the reason why we believe litigation matters is because at the end of the day, when Americans are not sure who to trust and there's misinformation flying, we as a country tend to look to the courts.
Yeah.
We have for centuries. Out of the Anglo-American tradition, that's where the truth is found. We have a bunch of shows and dramas about it. People know that. And so along the way, there have been a number of investments in litigation matters, both direct partisan litigation as well as nonpartisan litigation that have made a difference. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is a group called Protect Democracy, which is a 501c3 charitable nonprofit that has recruited and deployed a bunch of seasoned public officials and lawyers from both parties to help set up and reinforce guardrails around law enforcement. And they were a crucial part of some of the processes along the way that led to, for example, the impeachments, which obviously did not succeed, but helped to establish the record of some accountability.
Yeah.
Also, as an example, we help provide third-party payer support for the lawyers for Jean Carroll, so that she is going to be able to keep basically all of the $87 million or whatever it is that Donald Trump now owes her. And frankly, she would not have been able to afford those lawyers without help. And that kind of accountability matters. People, if people in this year, as they, the late deciders are deciding, remind me who Donald Trump is, I think it's going to be important that when they look up, there will be a unanimous jury decision that he was liable for raping this woman,
Yeah. So when you look at that case specifically, from the electoral side of it, not only are you looking at it from a judgment for a prospective voter to Donald Trump, but I could only imagine that it's also something that spends a lot of time in the news, and it is a very loud event in a way that another political action like advertising would probably come and go.
Yeah, loud is, you're right. What you are saying is fundamentally correct. I would push back a little bit on your choice of adjective. It's not that it's loud, because there's a lot of noise all over the place. The thing that's valuable about the courts is that the mainstream news, at least, does not feel the need to both sides it, right? Like the mainstream news reporting Donald Trump and Trump Corporation found guilty of fraud. Right? Found liable for fraud or something. They don't feel the need to then also say, at the same time, President Biden, paid his brother back a loan or something, whatever. Like they just don't need to do it. And so it has just a veneer. You say the ads come and go. It's less that the ads come and go. It's that the ads, or it's not that they're not loud, that they're not as loud, but you're right that they come and go. It's because we're resistant to them. We know not to trust them. Whereas with proceedings that are resolved in our legal process, people just inherently trust them more, and so they stick better.
I mean, I would say they're newsworthy in the definition of
genuinely
newsworthy. Like they are just something that doesn't normally happen. You don't normally see this level, at least for Trump specifically going into this election. Before we get into 2024, let me just ask you about ads in general. What is your philosophy on that kind of more traditional political expenditure? Because everything that you've talked about through this point has been very forward thinking and trying to be outside the box from what a normal PAC would be, which is let's facilitate a campaign and spend a bunch of money on ads.
Well, let me start with what I think the answer is, but there's a lot of, it's like one of those mazes where you had to get to a lot of dead ends to get to the answer. So if you have follow-up questions, feel free.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. The fundamental answer is that television ads are still a killer app. You have to do them. But there are huge variations in how well you do them, and the cost effectiveness of them. So for the purposes of the presidency, basically, the groups that are really good at this, and it's the Democratic super PACs that have now become quite good at it. Future Forward USA, which is run by Chauncey McLean, and American Bridge, which is run by Mary Pat Bonner and Bradley Baychak and that whole crowd. Those organizations, what they do is they like, for example, Future Forward, they have already started buying television time.
Yes.
Because the rates are much lower now.
Yeah.
But the ads that they run they will not run any ads now. Or maybe they are, but if so, they're doing it for donors. That's not their main strategy. Like, running ads now is basically not useful for anything, any purposes whatsoever, not even for testing. It is there was a panel the other day about whether it was a good idea to spend money on ads. And the panel was Rachel Maddow visiting Pod Save America, Dan Pfeiffer, all these incredibly smart Democratic strategists and thinkers. And they were all saying it's a good idea to be spending money on ads now because maybe something sticks. And it's just so wrong. The only way they could say that is if they just didn't know the other ways you could spend that money. It's such a waste of money. It evaporates into the air and goes away, and no one remembers it. The decay rate is super high, and the people who have not yet decided which way they're going to vote, the actual voters that you might move, they do not want to decide.
They haven't tuned in.
They're going to decide at the last minute. They really don't want to. And so they're going to decide in the context of the salience when they feel like they have to, which is after Labor Day. And so it's in that last 2 months when you need to be on the air. So reserve all that time now, but don't decide now what to run. Decide what to run then. And decide it. And one of the things that Future Forward does, and they did this in 2020 as well, is they generated and tested their own ads based on hunches that they were seeing based on them, but they also brought into and tested ads from the other super PACs, right? Like Priorities USA and so forth. And so when they're testing all those ads, they start showing out the results. And so instead of people running ads that please the donors, which is a huge problem in both parties.
Sure, I would imagine.
You write ads to please donors so you can get money, but those ads don't actually move voters. Huge problem in 2016 on our side in particular. But it's a problem in general for both parties. Future Forward USA just did away with that. We have ads, you have ads. We will run the ads that are doing best at the time.
That's it. There's no other sign off up the chain. We're just going to test them. We're going to see which ones do well, and we're going to put them on the air.
Right. And we're going to test them real time because a test 2 months early won't be valid because you're testing whether the ad moves you in the conditions you're in right now.
Yeah.
So for example, issues that are salient right now, Israel, inflation, are they going to be salient in August, in September? I don't know. Maybe.
We don't know. Yeah.
We just don't know yet. And so, now the other thing I'll say about ads is that there are a number of really good testing platforms for the late testing, right? So some of the groups we put some capital through a research consortium called Higher Ground Labs. Have you heard of them?
No.
It's a democratic venture capital incubator, and they spun out a bunch of tech and new companies after, starting in 2017. And several of them were polling and message testing consortia like, Swayable was one, Avalanche, Grow Progress, Change Research. These all exist now, and they're quite good. So there's a number of good, and then also the big existing platforms like Civis Analytics have some really good content testing tools as well. So the testing tools to decide late which ones you're going to run are very, very good. And so what you do is you just run those, and then you mix up across TV and digital just based on a specific optimization, right? So it's, so it should be about 50-50 probably.
Yeah, let me ask you that, because I mean we're going to get a little bit into the weeds on kind of the efficiency money wise here, but if you are a PAC, one of the big arguments, especially now as we've blended a lot of the lines between what a traditional PAC should do versus a campaign. We saw Ron DeSantis's PAC, which effectively ran his campaign. Turned out to be a disaster, but it worked
really well.
Yeah, it was an absolute crap show. But there is a lot of experimentation. By the way, I listened
to your retrospective of the DeSantis campaign, and I agreed with it completely.
Oh, thank you. There's the question is, if a campaign can buy a television ad for cheaper than a super PAC can, but a super PAC can raise an infinite amount of money in a way that a campaign cannot, what's the best way to put money on television? Should you have the campaign raise the money? Should you direct those donors to the super PAC? And then in a evolving media world where, like you said, if it's 50-50 digital television, should the PAC be focusing far more on things where there are no penalties for PAC buying the media, like online, which is increasingly how people get their television to begin with?
Yes. So everything you've asked is right. And the shorthand is roughly, if you are, so our role is, as you, at the beginning you asked, what is investing in us? And what investing in us is basically a club investing in the idea of the United States of America as an Enlightenment era polity. And and the specific threat posed by the Trump movement is a very ancient threat. It's a very normal part of human existence, but it's one that this country has avoided mostly. Certainly at the federal level, we have avoided until now. And by that I mean the peaceful transfer of power and sort of protecting all of that. So if you're talking to people who have a lot of money, high net worth individuals who've been successful in this society, and they want to preserve it, the first thing to do is to give money in hard dollars.
Yeah.
Give away hard dollars until there's no other place to give away anything else, because it's just better math, right? Even if the decision is slightly worse, if you get like 3 times better buying rates, you get 3 times as much reach. It's not close, right? But there's a limit. Like, I think the limit for an individual to give to all of the alphabet soup of the committees together, if you're not barred in any way by pay to play rules and so forth, I think the ceiling is under $1 million.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's a high net worth individual who wants to do more than that, then start with that and then do more.
Yeah. So you would then, not only give to all the committees, give all the campaigns, but then you are giving to super PACs for which and organizations that would do it. Now, with that, what is your personal guideline? And without getting into necessarily this race, or we can if you want, how should that money be split from the PAC perspective on television versus digital? Should it be 50-50?
So look,
should it be more than that?
So I am not a deep expert, and the super PACs that I mentioned, Bridge and Future Forward, have plenty of those kinds of experts.
Okay.
So they will get that optimization right. But what I will tell you is that your basic instinct is correct, that for super PACs, digital should be more emphasized than it has been. My understanding is that the super PACs this cycle are going to go about 50-50.
Yeah, that's what I'd heard, and I think that's 100% right. In fact, I would almost even wonder whether or not this will be the last time that it's 50-50 and not something tilted more digital, especially if you look at where media is being consumed.
Well, the other thing I just say, Justin, just to be clear, is strengthening American civil society through political philanthropy to prevent the Trumpist movement from taking office does not happen only through super PACs and litigation. It happens through 501c3 turnout work. It happens through, public engagement and all the things. So I didn't want you to think that it was only
no.
It was only like C4s are obviously a huge part of it as well.
Yeah. I'm just fascinated by it. Let's focus on 2024 though. While we were going back and forth via email to set this up, you mentioned that the big story of our current political calendar, far away from Election Day though it is the Hur Report and the Biden campaign and administration's reaction to it. And you mentioned that you had a point of view on it. What is your thought?
Yeah, it's just my point of view is just amplifying some of the good work that's already been out there. So at the time we were having that exchange, some of the good stuff had not come out. On the left, Heather Cox Richardson wrote a lot about this. On the right, The Bulwark has written a lot about this. But basically, Biden, I've interacted with Biden personally, and I've interacted, several of my friends work in his administration, including a couple of cabinet secretaries. This guy does not have the age problems that people fear. The age problem that people fear is that he will not be a good president. That's not his problem. He does not have that problem. He sits in huge, long meetings all day and is able to direct the presidency. And it's been a fairly successful presidency in a very tumultuous time. We have the most successful economy in the world right now, and it's not close. And the age, there's a few reasons why age is hurting Biden a lot right now and in general. One is age is the one thing that Republicans can say about Biden that is a deep critique that is actually true.
That he's older.
Yeah, because like most of the shit they say about him is just objectively false. Like he clearly doesn't cave to the left. He's clearly not about to appoint AOC. He gave him an immigration bill, right? The economy's good, shots in arms, right? Like, but he is old.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing is that his manifestation of old, like from the perspective of America's best interests, what you don't want is someone who is getting old in a way where they're becoming crazy and cranky and full of narcissistic rage and that sort of thing. That would be dangerous old.
Yeah.
But and Biden doesn't have that. What Biden does have that everybody can see is the physical manifestations.
Yes.
He shuffles.
Yeah.
He moves gingerly.
Yeah.
It's obvious. Now, the problem is that in a visual, physical environment, we're all, social mammals, social primates, and we see this big alpha shouting around, and we're like, oh, that kind of feels like a leader. And then you've got this other guy who is amazing, but is a little more soft-spoken and kind of shuffles a little bit. And instinctively, all of us orient around that, and there's an instinctive thing we have to deal with. Anyway, I just wanted to just be out there as someone who's in this space, in the donor community, just very clearly, this is going to be an election between Trump and Biden. Yeah. Biden has been an amazing president. Biden's age clearly has not stopped him from being a good president thus far. And there are plenty of fields, including diplomacy and finance, where the value of age in terms of wisdom and networks is offsets the things you lose. And an example that, Reed and I like to give sometimes is a friend of mine and I like to give is that Warren Buffett made the vast majority of his money after he turned 83,
Yeah.
So,
with all that being said, and that is certainly an argument that I have seen, what is the best way to make that argument to the American people? Because, obviously that's going to be the theory of the case. This is going to be an issue that will be dealt with. And from my perspective as a commentator who watches this, what I don't think is helpful for the Biden either administration or campaign as they merge coming up through the next few months is to be defensive about it. And that's what I thought was a mistake in how the reaction to this report. I thought they had a win on their hands with him not being charged. And instead it became, we're now entering into our first full week of talking about the report that I think largely happened because they reacted to it immediately.
This is interesting. Yeah, I was listening to some of your stuff on this, and you make some good points, but I think I actually disagree with your perspective on this.
Okay.
So, look, let me start with what I think the best answer would be. The best answer is not to be defensive, but to have fun with it.
Yes, I would agree.
So, there's this guy, I'm cribbing ruthlessly from Jonathan Last, who's this conservative Catholic writer, but he says, the cornier, the better.
Yeah.
Just lean into it more and more. Like, guys, I'm 85, or was it 81? Well, shit, I'm older than you are. The cornier, the better. And then, having set expectations and given the humor, let's now watch me talk as compared to how that guy talks. Over a slightly longer period of time. Not watch with the sound off, but actually listen to the words that I'm saying. That's how it's got to work. Now, the reason why I disagree with you slightly is that I think the defensiveness does have a good chippiness. A little bit is vigor is better, right? And so one of the things that I think you said is that this has extended the news cycle. for the
Yes.
age issue.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Wait, about
Well,
no,
but that's
about the
not-
Hur,
but- but
about the Hur report. I would say
About the
specifically.
Hur Report, yes.
Yes.
But the Hur Report is not the issue. The issue is what the Hur Report does to the age. And with age, we should not be talking about it less. It is going to be the topic. We should be talking about it more. We should be talking about age as an issue. We should talk about age as something that affects all of us. We should be definitely clipping the quotes from Haley and DeSantis about how Trump has changed.
Yep.
To me, it's not a problem to extend the coverage of the Hur Report because actually I think substantively there's a very good argument that this guy did the reverse Bill Barr, took an exoneration and made it into a political hit job. There's tons of specific writing in the Hur Report that was really over the top, that if the Mueller Justice Department had any supervision at all, they would have, you can't write that in your exoneration report. It's a hit job. But they refused to supervise him because they didn't want to do what Bill Barr did to Bob Mueller. And so again, like as usual, the good guys who are playing by the rules get it coming and going. Now, the good news is with all this extended attention, that's starting to come out. And again, like the swing voters that we need, they're not paying attention to this right now, not in any way that's going to stick. It's the people that you need to persuade are people who are a little bit further up the information chain that are kind of influencers. And the more the Hur Report is in the news, the more people are like, oh, that was a hit job. That's bullshit. And Trump's actually older and worse.
Yeah, I would disagree with you in that I don't know if drawing a line between Biden and the Justice Department serves what I think got Biden elected in 2020, which is that he is a steady hand at the wheel. He is going to let the cards fall where they may. He's that Merrick Garland is not his personal lawyer. He doesn't have to agree with everything that he did. Now, is there room for pushback? Is there room for somewhere in the Democratic orbit for somebody to say exactly what you're saying and go full bare knuckle on it and call it a hit job? Absolutely. I 100% think that it is. I don't know the closer that it gets to the candidate for
Fair
me.
enough. Yeah, that may be right. But I will say, there's a big difference between, the specific reference, the fact that Joe Biden, literally the busiest job, there may be other people who are as busy, but there's nobody busier than the president of the United States. So it is the busiest job you can have if you're taking it seriously. And it's the day after October 7th, right? So it's the busiest time at the busiest job. And there's 5 hours. And he's saying doesn't remember years. Years, who remembers years? You remember dates. And so the claim that he didn't remember the year, he didn't off the cuff remember the year Bo died, that's not that unusual. And also why the fuck would you say something like that? You fucking asshole. And so it's different from when Trump is talking to the Justice Department where he's literally firing people unless they go after folks he doesn't like, versus Biden just complaining about what was a political hit job.
Yeah. I think that there's I think we totally agree on the idea that not a lot of people have tuned in right now. And right now this is a high level game in terms of who is paying attention to it. But the other thing we totally agree on is that age is going to be a big conversation throughout this because we have, the oldest race ever, and it is beating the last oldest race by 4 years because it was the same guy. So we will certainly, there's nowhere to go in terms of the conversation around this, and the Biden campaign will certainly have to figure out a way to talk about it, as will the Trump campaign going forward. But somebody that I've really enjoyed talking to is Dmitri Melhorn. Dmitri, thank you so much for joining us. If there is another place where folks can direct their attention, please let us know.
Will do.
Okay. Thank you very much.